everyone, and welcome to our weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from those who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughn, and I am the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital, a diverse and collaborative community of women who share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can join the movement at togetherindigital.com. And today we are tackling something that resonates with so many of us, that nagging little voice called imposter syndrome that whispers to us to say that oftentimes that you are not enough. And I could not be more excited to introduce to you our guest today, Diamond Drip, who is here to show all of us how you can turn that voice down or shut it down in most cases, let's hope, right? With our authentic power. Diamond is a brilliant coach and a speaker who has been featured in New York Weekly and the QED Inc. on QED Radio. She has taken her background in visual communications and brand strategy and combined it with the fascinating worlds of human design and gene keys to help women break free from self doubt and step into their true potential. What I love about Diamond is that she is not just sharing a theory, she has walked this path herself, transforming from a stressed out entrepreneur into a confident leader who helps others do the same. And one of my favorite things that she says is that the limit doesn't exist, but fear and self doubt will make you think it does. Love a good quote. So, whether you're questioning your qualifications, gosh, comparing yourself to others, talk about the thief of joy right there, or you're ready to just trust yourself more deeply, you are in for some great learning and new tools to be able to explore and help yourself make that shift from imposter to empowered. Diamond, welcome to the Power Lounge. I'm really excited to have you here with us today and to dive into this conversation.
I am so excited to be here with you, Amy, and our listeners. As much as I don't like imposter syndrome, I love talking about ways that you can combat it because so many of us battle it. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter, what point you are. Imposter
Yeah.
syndrome kind of grows with you.
Mhm. Absolutely, and it's been one thing, honestly, lately that I have been taken into account how many people feel it, not just women, men as well feel a deep sense of this. They're just not willing to admit it. So, fellas, if you're listening, this is for you too, okay? Right? Let's get vulnerable here. And I also just wanna say I have only just recently learned of human design. Oh my gosh. We could have a whole another hour episode on this. I think it's just absolutely fascinating. Everyone who listens to this podcast knows I love personal development, anything that helps me understand myself more deeply, because what I love about that is it helps me understand others more deeply. I think it makes us better humans, it makes us better parents, better leaders. Um, that kind of stuff is just really cool. Gene Keys is newer to me, so I'm excited to learn more about both of those things and to let our listeners learn more about these things because I've been nerding out. But before we get into any of that, I would love for you to take us back to your days in visual communication and brand strategy, a space a lot of our women in Together Digital are in, and share with us a little bit about that and what really first clued you into what might be, that there might be a deeper layer into helping people show up more authentically.
Absolutely. So, when I was predominantly talking about visual communications and brand strategy, one of the ways that I would always encourage my clients to get out there was through video. And that's when all the stuff would come up, right? The fear of judgment, the fear of engagement, the fear of, what if I say something wrong? And I'm like, this is your message. How can you
Mhm.
say your message wrong? Like,
Mm.
it was baffling to me, and I was at a point in my own professional journey where I was trying to figure out what my business superpower was. And I found that it was when I found these tools, everything kind of just clicked. And once I started to see how much these tools were helping me step into my authenticity, and not just step into it, but be confident in my ability to do the thing. Because so many of us with imposter syndrome, we question our ability to do the thing. We question whether we actually belong at the table. And
Mhm.
here I had this tangible blueprint of like, no, you're designed to do the thing. And
Mm.
once I started experimenting with how it could work for me, I was like, oh, there's no way right? Like it's like the best kept
You
secret. It's
can't
like,
not
no
share it.
way. Yeah, it's no way. Especially because like I said, it helped me, but
Mhm.
then I received more validation on just how it worked because I pulled my daughter's design, I pulled
Yep.
my partner's design, and I
Mhm.
was like, oh my gosh, these are cheat codes for you guys too.
Yes. Oh, I love the term cheat codes. That's such a great analogy. Yeah, that's a
Yes.
great analogy. And we'll get into the definition and into deep diving more about
Mhm.
human design and well and what that means. But, you mentioned your own journey from stressed out entrepreneur to a confident leader. And I'm just curious, like, what was the turning point that made you realize that something needed to change? Like, sometimes that's part of the journey, right? Is like that self awareness and recognition that I need to stop and slow down and something has to change.
Yeah, so I was in a year-long business coaching program that taught a framework that, you know, many of us have been in this scenario, especially if you've been in the coaching space for a while. You enter this program and it's, we're going to teach you the steps that you need to
Mhm.
create this amazing income and impact in your business. And, I'm doing the things, I'm seeing other people have success, and I'm not having success. And I'm like, how is that possible? Like, especially coming from a background where external validation was something that, I related or equated to my success. And so
Mhm.
I was always a straight A student. And I'm like, I'm doing all the stuff that would get me a straight A in executing these frameworks, and somehow something is misaligned.
Mhm.
And, when things didn't work, I doubled down. I bought into more intensives. And I was like, this is insane. How am
Mhm.
I, spending all this time and money and energy and effort learning these frameworks, and like somehow there's still a disconnect. And so it wasn't until I realized, I was like, well, you're actually, like, you're doing things. Some things are, creating traction, creating some
Mhm.
form of success. It just doesn't look how you want. So why don't you take a look at what you're defining as success, and
Yes.
you redefine that for yourself. So that
Mhm.
was really, like, the business coaching program. It brought up a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And so that realization,
Uh-huh.
that, come to Jesus moment, as it were, it was the thing that was like, okay, something has to change. And instead
Yes.
of seeking out more
Mhm.
external things, why
Yes.
don't you look internally and see
Mhm.
what's in there instead?
Absolutely. I wanna share this story really quickly because it just happened yesterday. It's not exactly in alignment with, like, the human design aspect of things, but it's exactly what you're describing in the sense of we often go outside of ourselves to find the answers. And in this context, I'm in a room full of women leaders going through a women leader cohort for mostly women in corporate. And we're talking about and discussing executive presence. And as we're discussing it, it's just rubbing me the wrong way. And I can't explain in the moment quite how it's rubbing me the wrong way. But as the other women in the room are having their moments kind of verbally processing and expressing, what I'm hearing and realizing is that they're grappling with they want to really just know what it means to be authentically themselves as leaders and not be told what a leader should look and act like. And I said, how often are men asked to work on their executive leadership? But how many times in an annual review have you been asked or approached to work on your executive leadership or put in a situation where you're like, here's this article. Women, read this article, executive presence, because it's just a given. And so it's like we're constantly being asked to be put into these containers or work within these guardrails. And I do think burnout comes not from the overextension of ourselves in the sense of constantly working too much. It's almost working against the things that we think are supposed to be the things that we're working towards. So it's like the shoulds, right? And
Yeah.
it's like those constant running up against the shoulds and the containers that other people have built for us. And there was just this moment that when I was like, why are we even talking about executive presence? Like, we have it. It's just really about how we want to define it for ourselves. This one woman who works for a very, very like corporate company in the sense that they still have to show up in suits every day in the office 5 days a week says, I have been poring over executive presence books. I probably have 5 of them at home. I am throwing them all away. I'm getting rid of all of them. I'm throwing them all away, and I am going to spend more time with myself, journaling and looking at how I lead and how I want to show up in the room, how I want to make people feel, and that's going to be my executive presence. And it was just such a wonderful moment to see that. It was just like I wanted to stand up and applaud for her, just to kind of see
I
that.
want to.
Right? It was just so cool. I mean, just because especially I know I've been there. I've been that person that's like, "This is the model. This is the behavior. If I want to succeed, this is what I need to follow." And this is where human design, I think, is such a fascinating, fascinating avenue and tool for folks to start to kind of dig into and learn about. So, for our listeners who are new to human design, I would love it if you could kind of break down what it is and why it is such a powerful tool overall, but also in the context of overcoming imposter syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely. So, human design is a synthesis of a bunch of different ancient and modern sciences. And what it does is it actually maps them over each other to create what we in human design call a body graph. And when you look at this body graph, it shows you how your energy flows, it shows you what your strengths are. And there's so much insight that can be gained down to what environment you thrive best in, how you digest food, and what your perspective is and motivation is when you're moving throughout the world. And one of the things that I have found to be deeply satisfying in human design is the main theory behind it. So we as souls incarnated in this lifetime to experience ourselves. And so what I love about human design is it it helps you to almost navigate and move through and welcome opportunities with less resistance, similar to the story that you told about the person that you met a couple of days ago, or was it yesterday? um, we spend so much energy and effort trying to be what we think we should be, or trying to be who other people expect us to be. And what human design does is it's like, no, this is how you were designed. These were the gifts that your soul chose in this lifetime to be successful. And if you and if you stop trying to control everything, because we as humans, especially from a cultural perspective, we have come to this belief that if we just plan enough, if we just do enough things, that we can control the outcome. And many of us are learning and seeing that that's actually not that's actually not
Mhm.
true. Like, there are so many sayings about, life is happening, life is, doing things while you're busy making plans, and it's so true. So
Mhm.
what one of the things that I love most is that it's this kind of surrender that happens. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, if we are able to let go of this sense of control that we think that we have over the situation, and get out of our heads and get into our bodies and tap into the wisdom of our vessel and the gifts that we were, that we chose in this lifetime, we can welcome and redefine success with so much less resistance,
Yeah.
without bumping into so many different things.
Mhm.
And so, when it comes to the context of imposter syndrome, one of the things that I found is that it helps you understand what makes you different. A lot of people say that human design is the science of differentiation. And
Mhm.
so, with that in mind, when you start to understand that, literally, so I've pulled over 200 human design charts at this point, and not a single one of them looks exactly like somebody else's. And so it's this kind of understanding that, how can, there's that saying of like comparing apples to oranges. If
Mhm.
we are all designed differently, why are we comparing ourselves to things that are outside of ourselves, to people that are outside of ourselves, to accomplishments that, you know, we we have our own accomplishments. And so that's really at the root of imposter syndrome, is this kind of comparison, this
Yes.
feeling of being like, you should be further along, or you should have
Mhm.
this many things because that person has this many things. And when
Right.
you start to understand that we're all like, we all know we're different,
Yep.
but like this is like tangible, your
Mhm.
energy
Yeah.
flows differently. It's
Mhm.
like, well, how can I compare myself to this
Right.
other person?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's like looking at 2 different cars. It's like having, like, a tiny little fuel-efficient electric car versus, like, a Ferrari,
Hmm.
and saying they're gonna get to the same place at the same time in the same way, you know? It's just it's not. There's no comparison, and then when you take comparison out of the equation, yeah, there's a lot less suffering. I also have loved learning, outside of, like, the energy types, like the manifesting type specific and non-specific, the ways in which you are meant to manifest. I have 2 friends that are both restaurateurs, both about to open up a restaurant, actually one who has and one who is working on it, and the one who already has is just, it's been rough, physically, mentally, emotionally, and worry about her in the sense of, like, all that she has been through to get this place open, and she has just been planning every moment of every day for the last more than 6 months. It's been a year and 6 months probably. She works close to 120 hours a week, and, you can see it and feel it on her. And the other friend, so very similar type of restaurant, is working on opening it, yet also traveling to, like, Italy, and had, like, the whole restaurant flood out 2 weeks before the restaurant was meant to open. And we're getting together, we're having a conversation, and, one asks the other, "Well, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna do a soft opening? Are you delaying your hard opening?" Very specific questions, right? And the other friend's like, "Yeah, no, I mean, I'll figure it out." So very non-specific. And in that moment, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I wonder what both of your human design types are like." So I put them into, like, I pull up their charts, right? I know. See, I'm such a nerd about this already. Pull up their charts. And what do you know? One, they're both manifesting generators, so not much of a surprise there. They share some very similar gifts, and they are both non-specific. The first woman that is driving herself into the ground and making herself sick, who is insisting on being so specific, is working so out of alignment. Like, she's getting there, but she's so unwell in the process, you know? While the other one is, she's like just like her she's got a catering business. Everything is, like, going her way. Sometimes I joke and say that she, like, sat on a leprechaun because she's just so damn lucky. Like, so much stuff comes her way, and it's just, she just manifests such great opportunities and business for herself and such a great team, and again, definitely works hard, but it does, like you said, it just comes easy. It seems to come so much easier, and she's so much
Ooh.
lighter because of it, and it
Do
really,
you
I think it
remember
is
what
nonspecific. Go ahead, what?
do you remember what her profile was? Did she have a 2 in there?
Let me look. I have them in my app, so, yeah, I can tell you really quickly. It's so like, I think they might have even had, like, they might have even had the same number types, and I do love this. You are right, like, this whole having and being able to put your people in. So no, actually, this is interesting. So they have same numbers, but oh, no, they're both 3 fives.
Okay.
They're both
Okay.
3 fives, and I'm not quite as familiar with, like, the numbers quite yet. So, yeah, yeah.
So the reason I asked, and it might even be in one of their, because on both sides there's all
Mhm.
those numbers next to the planets. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if one of those there's a 2 in like the business sphere, because the 2, and this
Ah,
kind of dives into Gene Keys a little bit. The 2 is
okay.
like known as the dancer. They kind
Okay.
of dance through life, and so consequently they question whether or not they belong at the table sometimes, because things just come easy and
Ah.
people kind of brush them off.
Uh-huh.
But like it's so visible to see. So I
Yeah.
always get curious if
Yeah, it is fascinating. So, like, as they're just having this conversation, I'm like, "Oh, well, Crystal's clearly non-specific because she's just like, 'I'm gonna roll with this, like, stuff happens, and I'm just gonna go with it.'" And Kristen's like, "Oh my gosh, everything has to be planned to the nth degree." And then when I pulled up her chart, I was like, "Oh, wow, like, I get that you feel this sense that this is how you have to exist in the world, but your design is saying that you're non-specific. You're working against your design. What would it look like for you to just to let go a little bit, and maybe
Talk
let manifest things by letting things just happen?
That's really hard for three lines sometimes. So the three
Yeah.
is like the trial and error, the martyrer. And so with our
Mm.
conditioning, especially when you think about like going into the restaurant business, there's so
Mhm.
much conditioning around like that's one of like the hardest
Yeah.
businesses to
Oh my
start and keep
gosh. I have
because
so
so
much
many
respect for those
businesses fit,
ladies.
right? And so there's all this conditioning. And so when you're I don't know if this was the first time they learned their human design,
Yeah,
but
it
when
was.
you're a three and you don't yeah, when you're a three and you don't know that you're a three, if you are constantly bumping into things, like
Mm.
you through conditioning, you shift into this mode of like, well, I don't want to keep learning lessons. I want to just get it right the first time.
Ah,
And they
gotcha.
kind of veer into
I
perfectionism
gotcha.
almost
That makes sense.
versus embracing the three and just being like, okay, well, this didn't pan out how I wanted it to, but what can
Mhm.
I learn from this,
Yeah.
lesson? And so talk about going against your design. Threes are
Yeah.
meant to bump into things. That's how they learn. And so when you
Ah.
veer into perfectionism, it's like you're
Uh-huh.
gonna face resistance because
Right.
you're going against your process of how you interact with the world.
Mhm. Oh, gosh, yeah. Oh, wow. That's so cool. I would say the other thing I love about human design has been that's really been insightful for me, and I think this would really too help with people's imposter syndrome, honestly, is is your authority.
Hmm.
Getting, like,
Yes.
more in touch with how you make decisions. I am sacral authority, and so learning that my gut is how I make decisions, and when the world tells me that I shouldn't be going on my instincts and that I shouldn't go on my first feeling, but also learning that my gut likes yes and no questions, so simple things like coaching my husband to say, "Don't ask me what's for dinner or what do I want for dinner, say, 'Do you want Thai food?'" I will say the yes or no. That I like. Other questions will
Yes.
overwhelm me. Outside of the decision fatigue alone, just learning and how to coach, friends, family, coworkers, whomever, to sort of appeal towards my sacral authority, really does help. But then also just affirming that like my gut is my strongest sense in decision making. Is great because I can't tell you how many times that is always proven, in my business and work life where it's like, this has always been my first choice. And then people make me doubt it. And then I have to go the long route. And then we always just come back to where I started. And I'm like, come on.
Yes.
So
Yes.
learning your authority, I think, is another really, really great like you said, it's almost like it's just it's reaffirming, and it helps you get past that imposter syndrome once you kind of understand your design.
Yeah, like I would say inner authority is probably, any person you ask, they'd say that your strategy and authority is the most important thing about your human design.
Mm,
So the
yeah,
more you can experiment and practice with it. So I love that you're like coaching people around you to be like yes or no questions
right.
and then actually giving yourself the space to just feel into your body and trust what comes up for you.
Mhm, yeah, absolutely, and just trying to condition it to be right because there's so much to unlearn because it is hard, like, I think
Mm.
as women specifically, we're taught to put other people's needs before our own, especially as mothers, which we were just discussing before we got on the call, both of us with head colds and sinuses. Kids, colds, yay. Everybody's needs are put first. So it's like, reconditioning that sacral authority is hard, so it does take practice and time. On that note, you've worked with a lot of women leaders, and I was kind of curious, what are some of the most common self-doubt patterns you see on this topic of imposter syndrome, and how does understanding your human design help to start to break them? I feel like we've touched on some of them, but what are some other ones you've seen?
Yeah, so some of the ones that we've touched on a little bit already is this like fear of judgment, this
Mhm,
fear of stepping into your voice, your message, your power, really, your gifts, because you're afraid that you might step on toes. Like even with like you were talking about sacral authority, that then implies that you have an open or undefined emotional solar plexus. And
mhm,
for a lot of people who have that, because they take in the energy from those around them, like they're like, I don't want to see or feel you like down or sad or whatever. So like how can I fix it? How can I make it better? Versus
yeah,
recognizing that they just kind of have to get through it themselves. And so it's kind of like releasing this conditioning around like what they think they or how they think they should or have to show up, and stepping into
Mm,
like no. And so one of the things that I found that's been really helpful has been around the incarnation cross piece, which,
mm,
this is human design, but this is also where you start bringing in some of the gene keys a little bit. But with the incarnation cross, there's three types. There's a right angle, so those people who are here to have a really personal journey. So they're here to learn how to operate, they're here to heal themselves. And then, if they so choose, they can then share that information with other people so that they can heal themselves as well. If you're a left angle, then you came here. And you've got some karma from a past lifetime that you're actually here to clean up. So you're here to have a really transpersonal journey. You need people in your life to help remind you of your purpose, to help remind you of your why. And then you have juxtaposition, which is like a fixed fate. And so even at that base level, it's this again, and I'll probably keep saying it depending on the questions, it's this surrender of like, okay,
yeah.
well, if I'm here to have this, I'll say, most, I learned recently that most people are actually right angle crosses. So they're here to
Interesting.
have this really, yeah, I was like, oh, I thought most of us were left angles. Okay.
Yeah.
But I guess just the people that I attract are left angles, because I'm
I was
like,
gonna say I'm
I
left
don't
angle.
know.
I just looked.
Yeah, I'm like, I must, but that's aligned
Yeah.
because I'm here having this transpersonal journey,
Right.
and I can have like tips and insights about
Hmm.
how I'm moving through this transpersonal journey for other
Right.
left angles.
Yep.
But it's this kind of surrender of like, okay, well, if I'm, for example, a right angle and I'm here to heal myself, it then becomes empowering to take the time that you need for yourself, to recharge,
Yes.
to figure out what works for you, and to
Hmm.
understand that it's not selfish. So many times there's this
Yes.
conditioning around like, especially like we were saying, like moms, women, working
Yeah.
moms, it's like, what? You're
Mm,
taking time for yourself. Like, what about your kids? What about your business? And then it's kind of like the shaming that happens of like, oh, you were doing a spa day, like, and it's like when you're when you're a right angle, it's like I'm here to heal myself, and it can be really empowering to understand why you're here on a soul level, and
mm,
to not let the outside noise cause you to doubt yourself, or to make yourself wrong for doing things that
yeah.
are aligned, that feel good for you.
Right. Or to shame you into making yourself more available than you really should be
Yeah.
at the end of
That
the
part
day.
too.
You know?
Yes.
'Cause, like, we've had that healing time and moment, like, so this is great. I'd actually never quite understood or could follow, like, this whole right angle, left angle thing, so thank you for that.
Yes.
That's really awesome. It never made a whole lot of sense to me, but then, yeah, that brings a lot of clarity to it, but then, yeah, also it also helps me understand why why it's like, okay, I could show up and I'm a generator too, so I also can know why it's like I can show up and I can emit and provide and give energy to others and emit energy into the world because I'm not reflecting, I'm not projecting, I'm not, manifesting.
Yeah.
Those are all different types of energies. And once you all start to get into all of this, I'm also non emotional, which doesn't mean I don't have emotions. We can talk about that too here in a minute if you'd like.
Yeah.
But um, yeah, it also because of that, all this combination plus the left angle, it's just, I just have that capacity, right? From a design standpoint. And this really helps me to understand like where I've been with my friends in conversations lately, where it's just, I just have like a capacity, a little bit more of a capacity for some things right now, for some things than others, because sometimes others just need, like, more of that time and space, and I always wanna recognize and respect that, and I think design is another way, like, understanding your design and others' design is a really great way to do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, so my partner is a non-emotional, and
Mhm.
both my daughter and I are emotional.
Yeah.
And so um even getting him to understand, like we would have so many fights
Mm.
because especially in the past, because when he is passionate about something, he wants to talk about it right then. He's like,
Yeah.
if I wait, then I'm gonna like lose interest. I'm not gonna feel as passionately about it as I do right now. I want to talk about it right now. And he would poke the bear and try and
Yeah.
get me to talk. And I'd
Uh-huh.
be like, I don't want to talk right now because
Mm,
I'm gonna say something that's gonna hurt your feelings in this state
mhm.
that I'm in, right?
Yeah.
All my emotions, feeling all the
Mhm.
feels.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna be like, I am not going to know how to come back from that, right? I'm going to be
Mhm.
scared that you're going to like use it against me. So I'd rather, if we're having a heated discussion, take some time to really
Yeah.
reflect and assess how I feel and then come back neutrally. And that's, human design has helped him understand that because he's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, like he sees my emotional wave with my business. And
Mhm.
so he's like, I understand that it's not just a me thing. It's
Mhm.
not just, and it just creates that deeper level of understanding and empathy,
Yeah.
and encouragement to actually, give the person what they need, which is
Yeah.
sometimes space.
Right, right. And correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like non-emotionals too like tend to like emotionals tend to put out a lot of emotion, like emit a lot of emotions, in the way generators emit a lot of energy or provide a lot of energy into the world. But non-emotionals tend to receive. So like for me, like as a non-emotional, even though again we all have emotions, it's more about
Yeah.
like I can hold space for people's emotions. I tend to be, and my daughter's also not emotional, but very, very empathic. And so it can be very draining in that sense of like, I can kind of hold, when I'm holding space for others, I'm holding back and holding down my emotions. And so that can be very exhausting and very draining. So you have to kind of really be like intentional about how, when, and where you're spending your energy and your emotion and giving time and space for your own emotions. Because as a non emotional, you don't express it often, or you don't often feel like you can, right? Because you're the container versus the one emitting it. Would you agree? Is that right?
Yeah. Emotionals put out that energy. And it's funny because
Hmm.
I have this example now. We went to dinner
Hmm.
and I have a favorite restaurant at this a favorite restaurant, a favorite waitress at
Uh-huh.
this restaurant. And the host was like, okay, you're gonna be in Mercia's section. And I was like, ooh, yay, I love Mercia. Like, this is great. It's gonna be
Uh-huh.
great. And then this other waitress comes and her name is Jessica. And she's like, hi, I'm Jessica. I'll be your waitress. And I just kind of was like, but you're not.
You're like, you're not Marcia.
Yeah. And so, eventually they fixed it and
Uh-huh.
Mercia came over and she was like, yeah, I'll be your waitress and things like that. And he's like, I felt you deflate. Like I felt your
Aw.
energy. He was like, you are so
You could
excited.
read the
And it's
room.
yes. And it's because, and I want to address the non-emotional thing, right? Everyone has emotions. We
Yeah.
are emotional beings,
Yeah.
like hands down. The thing with people who have an open or undefined solar plexus, which makes
Mhm.
you a non emotional in human design, is that you are empathetic because you
Mhm.
take in the energy from your environment and from other people. And for a lot of people, when I'm doing readings, I'm like, as a child, it probably was difficult and you were labeled as emotional because it was difficult for you
Yes.
to figure out like, is this mine or is this? And so
Uh-huh.
sometimes people who don't have that solar plexus defined, they have short fuses because they're just like, I'm taking in all this, all
Right?
this
What do I
stuff,
do with
and
this?
I'm
It's gonna spit it back
feeling
out at you.
yes.
So
But you
true.
guys are very empathetic, which is I'm glad that you have that with
Yeah.
your with your daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, because she's even more so, like, she just picks up on all the energy, I feel like even more so than me, or maybe I've just maybe even just I've forgotten that part of myself over the years and have conditioned myself for more to take in less, but yeah, no, she feels it all. She feels it all, which is sometimes just hard to see because she's, only 11. It's like, "Oh, don't do that to
Yeah.
yourself," you know? But yeah, so we talked a little bit earlier about trusting your gut. I want to come back to that.
Mhm.
Through human design in this lens, what does that actually mean to practically for some of these different types?
Yeah, so it I consider trusting your gut to be synonymous with intuition. And so we live in a cultural context where certainty is praised over flow. And it's, statistics and logic and everything is praised over intuition. And so for any type, any authority, with the exception of like mental authority, because like that's a rare breed of authority where like actually everything is happening in your head. But you have to talk it out and have this sounding board, to see how it, but even then it's like you are technically labeled as mental authority, but
Mhm.
you have to talk it out with other people. You have to be in the right environment with those you trust so that they are your sounding board and you can hear what's being reflected back to you and see how it lands in your body once you speak it out.
Mm. Yeah.
So in every single authority there's this element of like body. If you're emotional, it's riding out your emotional wave and coming
Yeah.
to a decision from an emotionally neutral place. If
Mhm.
it's splenic, it's in the moment, right then and there. I've heard many people, many splenic projectors talk about this whole body, like, hell yes, that happens. Or like,
Mhm.
if there's hesitation, it's probably a no or not right now.
Yep.
Even for self-projected authority, like they have to talk it out. They have to hear their truth in their aura in order to gain that clarity. And so in all of these, you notice how there's not like, planning or like
Right.
logic or
There's no pros and cons list?
there's no right, there's no which way do I do. And so
Yeah.
it's this return to the wisdom that's actually in the body. And
Mhm.
it's so hard for people when they first find human design to trust that, because we've been conditioned for so long
Mhm.
that if you can't back it up with a 10-point PowerPoint presentation, then
Right.
like it's not valid. And intuition doesn't have that. Like you said, it doesn't have a pros and cons list. You
Mhm.
feel something or you don't.
Yeah.
And it's a process
Right.
of of realigning and learning how to trust the wisdom in the body, but really trust yourself.
Yeah.
Because this is something like, for me as an emotional authority,
Mhm.
I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 when I was 14. And so for, you know, over a decade, I made myself wrong for my emotions. I thought
Mm.
that there was something wrong with me for having really strong emotions or having these up and down waves. And
Yeah.
so it took a long time, and I'm still on that path of like, okay, what do I feel? Because
Mhm.
for so long my feelings were invalidated. I grew up, my mom didn't have a defined solar plexus, and she had a lot of mental, like her head is defined and her
Yeah.
ajna is defined. And so where you have definition,
Mhm.
that's the energy that you put out. And so a lot of times, I would talk about how I felt and she'd be like, but right. And then with her undiagnosed borderline personality with narcissistic
Oh, wow.
tendencies, I
Yeah.
would be made wrong for feeling what I felt. And so there was
Mm.
always this element of questioning how I felt. And now
Yeah.
I'm in a place where I'm like, no, that's actually what I'm supposed to do. But how do I
Right.
navigate these
Yeah.
ups and downs? And that's what the experiment is all about, is like learning how to trust yourself again after
Mm.
years of being basically programmed not to.
Right. And I mean, talk about being able to see that disconnect. And then when you can see that kind of a disconnect, one, you're finding alignment with yourself, but then you're also finding the reason behind the disconnect so that there's not shame or blame,
Yeah.
right? Because you can see like what's behind the disconnect, right? And I think that that really helps because sometimes it's like we talk to other people, we look at other people, and we're just like, what the hell are you thinking? Where are you coming from? I don't understand you. And it's because we're not designed the same. We don't process the same. We don't always emote the same. And so it's like if we can kind of just use a little bit of understanding and compassion, that's one way. But also, I think this human design stuff, there's some really just cool factors to it, um, for sure. And I love what you were just saying there too about, one of my favorite quotes is just never outsource your knowing. And if anybody here also again fans of the podcast know I love enneagrams as well. I'm an Enneagram 9, so I tend to merge. I'm a peacemaker and like harmony, and so general consensus used to be like my MO, and it still is like when it comes to certain decisions, right? But as far as decisions that as far as I am concerned now, I am with human design. I feel like I'm much more informed as to how I want to move in the world and make certain decisions for myself. Because it's just, having that other information. The Enneagram to me is more of like that shadow type of work where like the design is kind of like more of that internal knowledge, and again, I don't have to like keep going outside of myself to get the consensus from everybody else. It's like nice to have that alignment from other people when certain matters, but it doesn't need to be in all things. So yeah, that used to be the way I went about everything. And now I'm like, no, I don't need to call and complain or talk to everybody and process this out. Sometimes I just need to sit with myself, and think through this or
Yeah.
work through this or trust the gut feeling that I have about this, that it isn't the right thing for me and I need to make a move. So yeah. All right, let's dig into gene keys a little bit because this is new for me. How does it complement human design when it comes to building authentic leadership?
Yeah, so Gene Keys takes a closer look at the 64 gates in human design. In Gene Keys, they're called the 64 keys. And so it takes a closer look at the Chinese I Ching element and the quantum physics, in that every single key, every single gate has these three frequencies. And so the shadow is kind of the challenge, really. So when you talk about like the shadow work with the
Yeah.
Enneagram, like
Uh-huh.
Gene Keys, this is a perfect
Similar.
yeah. So the shadow is the challenge that you're here to overcome. It's gonna keep showing up. And the gift, which is the next frequency up, that's what, when you embrace your creative power,
Mhm.
that's what shines through. That's when you step into your authenticity, when you're aligned, when you're moving on your path, like that's what
Mhm.
shines through. And then the highest frequency is the city. And so this is a transcendent realization of, it's like a culmination of like, okay, this is aligned. This is that feeling of satisfaction, that feeling of success, that feeling of surprise that happens when you just kind of surrender to life and just live
Mhm.
within your gifts. And so it complements, because human design I like to see as very practical. It's like, this is how you make decisions, these are your gifts, and this is how your energy flows. This is where some of your conditioning comes in. And then
Mhm.
Gene Keys is for a lot. I like to see it as a more in depth personal development tool, because it involves a lot of contemplation. It involves a lot of thinking about your past and how, these shadows have shown up, and how could you have turned those into the gift? How can you be in your awareness more so that you
Mm.
don't dip into whatever that shadow is? Like for me, in my brand sphere, in my what I'm here to do in this lifetime, I'm here to be a force of continual expansion. And that's actually the gift of expansion. But the shadow is immaturity. This being in a place of external fixation and external validation, and not being internally grounded. And you can see the relationship of when you let go of this need, this fixation for, external people to say like, oh, you're doing great, which the school system does not help this at all,
No.
because it's all about like grades and everything.
Uh-huh.
But you have to like let go of that. And once you're able to validate yourself, once you're
Right.
able to have that internal stillness, you do expand more. You're able
Mhm.
to step into more things. And at its highest frequency, the city is superabundance, which that was a trip for me, because it was a push to actually even redefine what I thought of as abundance. Because so many of us, we equate abundance with money, or
Right.
this, outside things. But there's so many different variations. There's health abundance,
Mm.
there's time abundance, there's,
Yes.
relationship abundance. There's so many different elements that can
Mhm.
be pulled in there. And so I think that it complements, because, when you've been in the experiment for a long time, but you're still
Mhm.
hitting some of those blocks in your conditioning, the gene keys, being able to look at some of those, tumultuous times in your life where maybe you chose the shadow out of fear, out of lack, out of scarcity, out of this distrust. Like,
Mm,
how can you trust yourself enough to live in the gift, to show up in the highest frequency that you can?
yeah. I love that so much. And it kind of brings it back to where you started, which is redefining success, right? Stop
Yeah.
chasing the things that aren't truly for you. Because what's going to happen is you're going to work your ass off. You're going to get there and you're going to go, why aren't I happy? I worked so
Yes.
hard. Where's that shining moment of success and triumph? It falls flat and you're wondering why. Here's why. I love it. All right, we've talked about comparison a lot today, but I think it's so you just can't say it enough. We live in a very digital heavy, social media heavy world where comparison is just constantly in our face. How can women use some of these tools that we've talked about today to stay grounded, and kind of find their unique value to just avoid this trap?
Yeah. So I found that really leaning into your gifts. So doing, I always say do a reading because it's the quickest way. Like, I am a one line in human design, and so that's the investigator researcher. So I love going down a good
Hmm.
rabbit hole. I've watched videos, I've read different books, and so um, human design is one of those things that lots of people can go and Google and find different information. But if you really want like practical strategies and tips for your design, I always say grab a reading so you can get that understanding. Because
Hmm.
once you have an understanding of what you're here to do in this lifetime, like I always start with like the incarnation cross because it
Hmm.
tells you what you're here to do, what you're here to learn, what deeply fulfills you, and what your purpose is. And once you know and understand what that is for yourself, then other people trying to push you on a different path or make you be something that you're not, you're just like, that's not the way I was designed. That's not in alignment. And you're able to have that validation with these tools of like,
Yeah.
I was designed this way. This is how my soul chose to show up in this lifetime, how my energy presents itself to
Mm.
those around me and how I interact with the world. And so it can be really empowering to lean into these tools, and to exit out the outside noise. Like, one of the things that I recently had to do in my business was figure out all of the little things that I was leaning into that was causing me to exert more energy and effort in my business
Hmm.
than was actually needed at the time. Like, many of us use social media in our business, and there's this kind of unspoken, sometimes spoken rule. I don't know if it's still spoken because I've been in the process of exiting out outside noise,
Yeah.
but there's this rule of like, if someone comments, you have to respond back like within an
Yeah.
hour, or
So
the
much time.
algorithm's gonna ding you or
Sure.
whatever. And I'm like, and I spent so much time and effort trying to adhere to these unspoken rules that,
Mm.
I've just been, hearing about. And what I found is that when you actually do what feels right for you,
Hmm.
you still like you have much more success. And
Hmm.
not only do you have much more success, you feel better. Like you were
Yeah.
saying, there's this when you're trying to do all the things that people say that you should do in order to find that joy, to find that fulfillment,
Hmm.
it's almost like, well, I did the things and I don't have that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
what what am I not doing? And then you're
Hmm.
forced to continually get that external
Yep.
noise in trying to tell you like, okay, well, you did these things and
Hmm.
you don't have it, so why don't you do these other things? And then you spend so much time and energy like
Yeah.
doing things versus like being able to validate yourself, being able
Hmm.
to say like, this is what feels right in my business, being
Right.
able to bring those elements out.
Hmm. Yeah. And then again, you're not comparing. You're not comparing and you're
Yes.
not trying the things that aren't going to be working for you. What would
Yes.
you say is the most surprising insight you discovered about leadership through combining both your brand strategy and human design?
The most surprising thing that I found about leadership with this combination. So many of us, we have a message that sometimes people are scared to share. So we put on these these masks of what we think we should be sharing.
Mm,
And it has been the greatest joy to see the surprise on my client's face when I'm like, well, this is actually in your, like, for example, in your Mercury. This is what's in your Mercury. This is what you're designed to share. Or,
mm,
this is in your North or South node. And so this is how this has shown up in your life. And this is what you're moving into. And it's actually a line for you to talk about that. And they're like, oh my gosh, like, I thought people were going to shun me for that. And
huh,
so just giving them the encouragement of like, no,
yeah,
like that's actually, and then seeing the transformation that happens when they start leaning into what it is that's
yeah,
actually aligned for them to share. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know it could be this easy because we've been conditioned to
right.
believe that is hard. It's you
Ah,
gotta grind and hustle and do
it's
all
like
the
yeah, it's so it's kind of like helping them. So it's like affirming, right? That internal
yeah.
voice, not the imposter syndrome, the opposite, right? The authentic true voice that the imposter syndrome's been speaking over and rudely interrupting for God knows how long, right? And it's like the human design has been able to sort of tap that voice and say, "Hey, yo, actually you are the one we're supposed to be listening to and hearing." But social conditioning has been telling us, keep it down, keep it shut. And it is so true. I think, all of this aside, I think it was interesting. I was actually having a conversation with my husband last night when we started this conversation. I said, imposter syndrome is real for both men and women. He left academia and went into the professional world for the first time in his entire life. And it's been different. It's a different world. And, he's a researcher, he's introverted, but he wants to be social. He wants to feel connected. He wants to have friends. And, I told him, I said, one of the biggest unlocks for me, I think, was really just finding that people want to know the real you. They want to hear your true, authentic voice. And that if you are willing to just open up and share a little bit more and hold back a little bit less, I'm not saying you just need to go out and be like obnoxious and rude and inappropriate. But I think if you just be, what would it look like to be 10% more you, 10% more authentic? Because he's like a wonderful human being with loads of great ideas. So I'm like, I don't know what you're trying to hold back, but like, it's like if you were to just be a little bit more of that, what would that look like? Because I feel like the more, granted, we have such a great safe space here with Together Digital where women can kind of really step into and practice that authentic voice in a space that they don't have to worry about being shamed for, or, having backlash for. So I have that privilege of just having that all the time and I forget how to act in polite society. So because I'm just used to just being able to talk about all the things. But yeah, not having that privilege, I understand. A lot of us pick up and put on sometimes mini masks in one day. And I just do think a lot of this, so any tool that you can pick up and start to use for self awareness to tap into, find that authentic voice, and give yourself permission. When you put that out, people are so afraid it's going to detract, but it really does attract. Like you said, it attracts opportunity, it attracts friendship and connections in ways that you're just going to be so surprised by.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yay. Can you tell? I just love all this stuff so much. All right. We've got some folks listening live as always. So we love having our live listening audience. Before we go into our fun power round of questions, just want to make sure that you all know you can ask questions in the chat if you have them. I know all this stuff you guys are like, some of them you're like, what do you guys, I don't know what's been going on for the last hour, but you've all hung in there. So a couple of questions actually, like I want to make sure that we ask before we go to the power round questions too is, if folks want to learn more about human design, what are some good general resources for them?
Yeah, so on my website, they can pull their chart, and I actually send them a cheat sheet that helps them decode their design, as well as a playlist on my YouTube channel, which goes into visual explanations of these different things. Another resource that I have found super helpful, a lot of people know the traditional human design language, but Karen Curry Parker, she actually has language in quantum human design, which actually takes it a step further and talks about, emotional authority as creative authority. And so it's a little bit more empowering, and it brings in some
Cool.
of the different quantum elements of, inside
Mm.
the body. So I'd say any of her work is amazing to learn more about human design.
Oh, that rabbit hole just got a little bit deeper for me, Diamond. Oh my goodness. All right, we'll be sure to include some of those links for the YouTube channel and your website into our show notes as well. All right. I'm checking let me check the chat to see if we've got anything in there. All right, no
Mhm.
questions yet, but all right, we'll hit let me make sure I have the right open live stream chat. There we go. Oh, look at that, Danielle. Thank you so much. She's my
Yeah, she's
wing
awesome.
woman today on the and all the resources and the links. Look at her. She's on fire. You're the
She is.
best.
Yeah.
Love it. I was in the wrong chat. I was like, I have a sense I'm in the wrong chat. All right, cool. Cool, cool. Fantastic. Sharon was asking what app are we using? Do you have an app
Yeah.
that you use for any of this?
So I know Jenna
Yep.
has her app, the My
Okay.
Human Design app.
Mhm.
Most of the time, I just have people download their chart so they can have it as a quick reference. Mine is actually my screensaver.
I love it.
So,
That's
so
a
I
great
can always,
idea. Quick reference.
yeah, I'm like, oh, wait, they're talking about Gate 28. I think I have that. Oh, okay. Now I can really lock in and tune in.
That's fantastic. And then Garnell was asking if there's like something about the numbers. What are the numbers? Do you want to
Oh,
kind
the
of get into
profile.
that for just a second? Yeah.
Yeah, the profile line. So there are 6 different lines, 12 different
Hmm.
profiles in human design. And so essentially this goes into how your energy shows up in the world. So the first part of the fraction looking number is how other people see you. It's kind of like, what your aura presents to the world. And then the second part of the fraction is your underlying script of how you interact with the world. So, as we were talking about earlier with the 3-5. So a lot of people probably see these women, if yeah, you said they're the same, they see them like
Yeah.
trying out a bunch of stuff. They see them,
Hmm.
bumping into things, learning things through that. But the 5 is the solutions person,
Hmm.
the challenge solver, the save the
Yeah.
day kind of energy. And
Yeah.
so they're always going to be looking to fix something.
Hmm.
And so that's just their underlying script. For me, I'm a 5-1. So other
Me
people,
too.
yes,
Yay! High five. High ones.
yes, yes. And I kind of sense that when you're like, oh, this is gonna take me deeper. And so
Yeah.
like the 5 is, like I said, we're the solutions people. And
Hmm.
so people will project onto us that
Hmm.
we have something for
The
them because they
answers.
can just kind of sense it. And
Yeah.
that's why we as 5 lines have to be really careful about the expectations that we set for people,
Yeah.
because if they project that we can help them with something that actually we don't
Hmm.
have a foundation in, then
Hmm.
it turns very quickly from, oh my gosh, you're my savior, you're
Hmm.
awesome, you're amazing, to like, oh my God, I hate you. Like, why did you give me this advice? Like, it didn't work for me. And then your reputation's kind of on the line. So the 5 lines have to be really careful about, who they're attracting and what solutions they're providing. And then our 1 line,
Hmm.
we're investigators. We
Yep.
love getting to the bottom of stuff. We
Hmm.
love a good rabbit hole, a strong foundation of knowledge, which we also have to be careful because sometimes it can be hard to trust that you know enough to then
Hmm.
take it to the world. That was one of the things about human design that really resonated with me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so, so interesting. I love that. Yeah. This whole when you were talking earlier too, I almost brought up my 5-1 when you were talking about the the fixer. I was like, oh, when I was reading that portion of it, the challenge solver, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, no, I don't have to try to fix everything. But then also being like the voluntold one constantly, where it's like, I get it that you might have natural leadership tendencies, but it's just ridiculous how you could walk into a room and say very little and somehow still, how do I walk out of the room being the one told, like, oh, you're going to lead this, right? I'm like, what? I didn't even say anything. How did this happen?
Yes.
But once I read that, I was like, oh, okay. Got it.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you all for dropping the questions and during the conversation. I love it. I love it. And don't be afraid to reach out to Diamond as well if you have any additional questions after. All
Yes.
right. Let's go through these rapid fire questions real quick. What is your go to mantra when self doubt creeps in?
It's one of two things. So, what's on the other side of this, or what story am I telling myself here?
Ooh, I like both of those. Those are great. 3 words or less. What's the biggest mistake people make when dealing with imposter syndrome?
Caught in comparison.
Yes, ma'am. Can't say that enough. If you could put one message on a billboard about authentic leadership, what would it say?
Yeah. So, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust that inner voice that's saying there's another way.
Mm, I love it too. All right, last one. Complete the sentence. The moment you'll know you're stepping into your power is when.
Without any extra effort other than living your truth and teaching what you've mastered, the universe starts to bring you opportunities that you're excited to take advantage of.
Oh, I love it. You're so prepared. I love it. Thank you so much, Diamond. This was wonderful. I hope all of our listeners really enjoyed this. And again, just found one more tool and way to learn more about themselves, feel empowered, and hopefully understand and empower others as well. This is fantastic, Diamond. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Of course, of course. And thank you, live listeners. We appreciate you all and our podcast listeners. We're excited to have you again back with us next week. Until then, everyone, keep asking, keep giving, and keep growing. We'll see you then.